And now it is clicking us over. We will be live in just a moment. I'm so excited to host both of you. This is so wonderful. And we are live here on Mighty Mystery Celebrity Edition. I'm your on-air host, Sara DiVello, and I'm thrilled to be here with Debra Jo Immergut, author of You Again, and our celebrity host, Megan Abbott. Welcome, ladies. It's so great to have you here. So I want to go ahead and introduce you both. So Debra is the author of You Again, which is out from Echo HarperCollins, and The Captives, a 2019 Edgar Award finalist for the best debut novel by an American author, published again by Echo and in a dozen other countries. Debra has also published a collection of short fiction, Private Property. Her essays and stories have appeared in American Short Fiction, Narrative, and the New York Times, among others. She is a recipient of the Mishner and McDowell Fellowships. She holds an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop and lives in Western Massachusetts. Debra, welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. Happy
Yay.
to be here.
And Megan Abbott is the Edgar Award-winning author of the novels Die a Little, Bury Me Deep, The End of Everything, Dare Me, You Will Know Me, and The Fever. Her most recent book is Give Me Your Hand. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Salon, The Guardian, The Wall Street Journal, the LA Times Magazine, and The Believer. Her stories have appeared in multiple collections, including the Best American Mystery Stories of 2014 and 16. Her work has won or been nominated for the CWA Steel Dagger, the International Thriller Writers Award, the LA Times Book Prize, and 5 Edgar Awards. Megan, amazing, congratulations. Formerly a staff writer on HBO's David Simon show, The Deuce, she is now a co-creator, executive producer, and showrunner of Dare Me, based upon her novel for the USA Network and internationally Netflix. Oh my God, amazing. Born in the Detroit area, she graduated from the University of Michigan and received her PhD in English and American literature from NYU. She has taught at NYU, the State University of New York, and New School University. In 2013 and 14, she served as the John Grisham Writer in Residence at Ole Miss. She is also the author of a nonfiction book, The Street Was Mine, White Masculinity in Hard-Boiled Fiction and Film Noir, and the editor of A Hell of a Woman, an anthology of female crime fiction. She's been nominated for many awards, including 3 Edgars, the Hammett, the Shirley Jackson Prize, the LA Times Book Prize, and the Folio Prize. Amazing, ladies, welcome. I'm so thrilled to host you. Let's dive in. Megan, I'm going to turn the mic over to you.
Yes, boy, that was a really obnoxiously long bio that I have.
No, I'm going to sing your praises.
Yes, thank you. But I'm so excited to talk about this book. By the way, Debra, congratulations on the Washington Post review that came out today. And it was a New York Times editor's choice. So this is, and I tell you, I was completely consumed by this book, but I just want for everyone watching to sort of give us the premise so that, you know, they understand it and get excited. It's the story of Abigail, who's an art director at a pharmaceutical company in New York, and she's in her mid-40s, and, you know, wife and mother to 2 teen sons. And it begins with this great hook where she's, you know, downtown Manhattan, and she sees her young 22-year-old self, you know, at a payphone, which is already strange, right? There's the payphones left in Manhattan. And it's, you know, it's like looking into the past, but the past and the present have somehow merged. And I mean, obviously, you probably had to answer this a lot, but where did that idea come from? It's so specific and in some ways very high concept.
Well, it actually began with a vision just like that for me. So I was I was in New York, I was pushing my stroller down a street in a neighborhood I rarely went anymore, and I found myself on the block where I used to live in Greenwich Village many years before, when I was 22, and I had my 1-year-old. The block is like in the historic zone of downtown Manhattan, where they're not allowed to change too much, and so that shabby 5-floor building was maybe a little bit cleaned up, but basically the same. And I felt like it was so unchanged. I would not be surprised if the door opened and she walked out, 22-year-old me. And what stopped me was I thought, what would she say to me? You know, it was not what would I say to her, but what would she say to me? Because that girl really wanted to be a novelist, and I had not yet published a novel, but I had this kid and a job, and I thought, you know, I don't know what she would say. How would I talk to her about what's good about my life and why I hadn't written that novel yet? And I just thought, that's the novel I want to write. I want to write it so I can see what she says.
Oh, I mean, that's so resonant for me. We talked about this a little before we went live, but I mean, I'm around the same age as Abigail, and I came to New York as a 20-ish year old in the early 90s, like with aspirations, and I like, it felt so resonant for me. And I think, you know, it's not necessarily about New York, but part of it felt very specific to New York, how the different eras are kind of papered over each other, and you can get these little glimpses into, there's that line in the book, New York City is full of ghosts, right? And after reading your book yesterday, happened to walk by my old apartment in Hell's Kitchen, which was, you know, when I lived there, a really questionable neighborhood, that's hence the name. And now is quite fancy, and weirdly there was this comfort I felt that my block and my building was still like really junky and falling apart, and the tenement building I lived in was really like sort of, it was always sort of tilting. There was some comfort in that. So I think, you know, we're always trying to reckon with our younger selves. But I mean, for Abigail, why do you think it's that moment, without giving away spoilers, or like, for you, why did you make her that age? What was it about that particular choice?
Well, it's funny, I'm now a mom to a 21-year-old, so I see it from a completely different perspective, but I still feel that age is both super exciting and really difficult, because the branching pathways are so many at that point in your life, right? I mean, your options are pretty limitless, and you have you're just at the beginning. You really don't have enough road under you yet to really even know how to make those choices. So I think it's a hard time in life, but also, I mean, there's something wonderful about being so, you know, a life so full of possibilities. So that to me is just like catnip. I needed to explore it. And I guess also just thinking about ambition and creative dreams. I mean, that's when those dreams were born for me. That's about the time when I really thought, maybe I could actually be a writer. You know, I was always such an avid reader, but it seemed like an unreachable thing to publish a book. But I started to take myself seriously at that age.
Which has particular resonance, I think, for women, because it's something that in some ways the castle you have to keep building for yourself, because it will get knocked down in some ways by life. And that's the Abigail of the 45, 46-year-old Abigail. And I was thinking, you know, it's through the novel, you know, the reader develops various theories about what might be going on, but one of the ones early on, of course, is that, well, this is like a midlife crisis, right? And whatever that phrase means. And I thought to myself when I was reading it, there's so many, like almost all of American literature, with a capital L, books about midlife crises that are about men, and how few there are with women. And I wondered if you thought about that, or what you think makes it the same or different.
That's such a great question. And I do think, having kind of gone through my own version of it, I'd say the last 10 years, as I found my way back to my writing, you know, there was not that much written about it, and about women's midlife crises, and a lot about, you know, I mean, there's a whole conversation about sort of what happens to women once they're over 40, and in many fields and careers, but yeah, it seemed like really interesting, unexplored territory, and it certainly was. Like, you know, I think I always write about my own unanswered questions. And so as I reached that point in my life, I had a million questions that I just needed to work through. And, you know, for me, fiction writing is a great way to do that, although hard. I won't say it's easy, but it's certainly, it's probably the most fruitful form of thinking I can do about my own questions and issues.
But you did make Abigail a painter, not a writer. What was that choice? What drove that? I have an idea, but
well, I would say number one, I'm just like a would-be visual artist. Like I always gravitate toward them. I have lots of them for friends. I think they have a lot more fun in their creative time, even though it's super hard also and challenging creative work. But, you know, they can listen to all kinds of music and sort of I always love going into artist studios. They're messy and fun. And, you know, we sit in front of a computer screen and alone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We're getting some thumbs up from the audience. So I think this is resonating. This is totally resonating.
So that's got huge appeal for me. And it's sort of like, you know, of course, I'm sure you know, Megan, you can live vicariously through your characters. So I've always wanted to be in that world, but I do not have, my talent does not lie in that area. So that was the main thing. And also, I don't know if you feel this way, but books about writers, you know,
yeah,
they're hard.
They are, and I think that the tendency to make them navel gazing would be like really dangerous, and well, I mean, a lot of the books that men write about midlife crisis are about male writers or male professors who sleep with their students or whatever all the cliches are, and I think that's what made this feel different. And I think another thing is, I think her fascinating relationships with her sons, particularly her son who's become very politically activated and anti-fascist activity, and I loved that storyline, and I loved Abigail's the way she responds to it. How did that come in? And because it really, you know, it's 2015, I guess it's built around the election in many ways, and I wondered if that was part of it at the beginning or that happened later.
That happened later. I definitely, I have been, Antifa is something that I have been aware of for many years because I lived in Germany in the 90s, late 90s, or actually the mid 90s. And they have always been a factor in Berlin, and you see them on the streets. And so I was aware of them, and they popped up in 2016 in this country. It sort of caught my eye as I saw that, you know, the extremes were being activated, and I thought, well, that's interesting. And I could see this character, Pete. He's 16. He's got some learning disabilities. He's a little troubled and searching, like many kids are at that age. And I thought this might be something that he would fall into. And it might also resonate in that, you know, he's sort of looking for something different than his parents did, because Abigail and her husband, Dennis, are a bit frustrated with their lives, and they're really searching. So I think as kids, you know, as a teenager, you look at your parents and you think, are they happy? Do I want exactly what they have? And so, you know, I'd say, well, Abigail and Dennis love their kids and really love each other. They're all kind of struggling. And Pete's the one who kind of grabs this street fighting and gets into trouble with it, and you know, leads the whole family in a certain direction. So yeah, I didn't know it was going to come quite roaring back into the headlines the way it has in the last few months, the Antifa movement.
It seemed to make so much sense for him too, if he's trying to express himself in the way that both his parents, you know, were with their art, and he's sort of finding his energy and also rebelling in the way that, you know, I think for Abigail, who's sort of wondering about her choices, is exciting. And I thought that was so. I also love that it wasn't the usual teenage boy you often see in novels, where they're kind of sullen in the background and only care about having sex or playing or being on their phone. Like, I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of these, like, you animate him so much, and he and his comrades are, you know, it felt very exhilarating, which I think it does to Abigail too in its way. And you know, like, how far were you into it when you know, put that, I mean, that, because it seems to sort of give you so much of the energy in the last half of the book.
It definitely was an element that I added after I sort of had this older self, younger self, Abigail plot line in place. And I wanted to add some more dimension to their life in Brooklyn. But I would say, like, I look at the Antifa with a sort of impartial, perhaps skeptical eye. I just want to make that clear. And it's not what it seems, I would say. So it, you know, Pete thinks it's one thing, but it may not be that thing. And then Abigail kind of has to unravel all of that as she goes along.
Yeah. Which is also very much about being that age. It's the same, even in much sort of gentler, more individual form with her younger version of herself, where you think you understand these things and you think that these choices are clear, or in the younger Abigail, you know, sort of being mistreated by her male boss, for instance. There's all these aspects that that you can't see when you're young. You know, there's things you can see that you lose sight of later, but there's also things you can't see. And I wondered about all of that, especially given this also the election energy and Me Too, if that was also sort of that, you know, bleeding its way into the book.
And you know, I just want to pause really quickly. Welcome our audience. We are getting some comments, which I just want to let everybody know. I will be filtering those right over to our wonderful authors. So welcome everybody. Everybody's saying hi. Renee Rosen, one of our authors, is saying, Debra, so excited to see the inside scoop on your new novel. Kate Lauer says, hi, Debra. We've got some watchers from Eastern Massachusetts. Hi, everyone. Welcome. If you have any questions for Megan or Debra, just put them right in the chat box. I will get them over to the authors. Debra, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so, okay, I totally lost the question.
Oh, yes, right.
It's about those people.
That was my fault.
It was about the Me Too energy, and and her younger self.
Definitely. Yeah, so one thing I kind of wanted to play with, and just based on my own memories of myself in New York at 22 and getting my first job as a University of Michigan graduate, by the way.
Oh my gosh, something else in common. That's amazing.
Yeah. And landing in New York and my first jobs in magazine publishing, and just remembering all of that time and how clueless I was. Not that I actually had a wonderful first boss. But one thing that, and in that time, you know, the whole Me Too awareness of sexual harassment or sexual relationships in the workplace and how that all worked, we were clueless, right? I mean, that you didn't, we just were not enlightened about it, and you kind of took a certain amount of that for granted. I mean, that's not news to anyone, you know, at this point. So I really wanted to explore that dialogue between the, you know, the present day Abigail and her former self. And of course, present day Abigail looks at that, she remembers that boss and that relationship, and she says, you know, at one point when they're talking, and you know, they do talk a lot, she says, you know, you could charge harassment. You really, that's not right what he was doing. And younger Abigail, or younger A as we call her, says, you know, that's not harassment anyway, you know, whatever, I'm not going to listen to you, which is kind of like a lot of her attitude at the beginning, at least. And then they do sort of evolve.
Yeah.
Debra, I have a question for you. How come, I think it's fascinating that you were, the impetus of the story is that you were walking through your old neighborhood, pushing a stroller as a mom. Nothing much had changed in terms of the buildings, and you would not have been surprised to see your younger self. And you were mostly focused about and worried about what she would say to you, but you weren't, as Abigail often thinks about, focused on what she would say to her and whether she should warn, I have lots of notes, as you can see, whether she would warn her younger self, don't do this, and how much if she warns her will then impact, you know, the butterfly effect of what goes on. How come you think, why do you think you weren't worried about what you would tell her? Why were you only worried about what she would tell you?
I think it totally came out of the point of life that I was at when I was pushing that stroller, and it had to do with my own sense of frustration or with myself for not accomplishing my dream at that point. Now, of course, I'm now many years, like that child is 21, so it's this many years later since I first thought of that. And I think, well, of course you didn't. You had so much on your plate, and I'm much more forgiving of myself, but I was struggling. I mean, I think a really strong desire that's thwarted, especially a creative desire or personal ambition, can be really painful, and I really it's a very powerful emotion that we don't explore that much. And that's the heart of this book. So I think that was just what was top of my mind that day when I was walking down that block. But of course, later I've thought a lot about what I would say to her. And I've thought a lot about that 22-year-old. I really have become really fond of her. I don't think I would change anything. And I think I would tell her, you know what, you're going to wait a long time to publish that novel. You're going to go through a lot, and that's all going to make it so much better. But, and I won't expect you to understand that at 22, but I think you'll get it later.
Well, the other thing too is that you have this professor saying to her, protect your work, you have her musing about that. The professor telling her to protect her precious talent, and not getting that same warning for her husband, who's also an artist, which I think is going back to what Megan brought up earlier in terms of there's all these books about men's midlife crises and not women's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that phrase, her art school professor says something like, I understand that you're involved with this other student who is Dennis, who becomes her husband. They meet in graduate school. You're going to move to New York with him. What I would say to you is honor your gift. Too many girls don't. And I don't know if that resonates with you guys, but that was sort of, the message that sometimes comes to you when you're writing that you need to hear. And it came out of the mouth of this old art school professor. And I hope it's a message that some people will pick up out of the book and think about.
Yeah, I mean, I think we see that in a lot of young moms, right? Like we don't hear a lot of young dads saying, "Oh, I struggle too." We never ask young dads, "Oh, do you plan to go back to work?" But we always ask moms, "Are you going to go back to work?" And there's, that double standard runs deep. And a friend of mine is a celebrity chef, and she was on Chopped, and one of the celebrity hosts asked her, "Oh, are you going to come back to work?" Yes, I am. I'm a celebrity chef. And I'm a chef in my heart. Of course, this is my calling.
I think too, the women always have the burden that are supposed to be more practical, and the men are supposed to be the dreamers. And I think that's all changing now. And I think I'm so glad for younger people that are not putting up with any of this nonsense anymore. But it is amazing how much of the burden, and I think I thought it was so great that they were both artists, because then you do see how they wear this all so differently. I mean, we're not in Dennis's head, but nor should we be. It's so nice to have a woman sort of, like her longings and her desire for excitement too. There's this sexy detective, and there's lots of, she's having adventures, and there's something so wonderful about her getting that.
Yes, well, partially it's also an exploration of what it's like to be in a long marriage, which is something I know about. I've just celebrated my 31st anniversary.
Yay!
Well, okay, that's with my husband, and I think we're at 26 married. And so a beautiful long relationship, but those are hard and bring a lot of challenges and go through phases. So I would say my husband is also a creative person. He's a fantastic writer in his own right, and also has been working to put a roof over our heads, just like I have all these years. So we have been through this struggle together. So I would say, the creative journey is hard no matter what. And I wanted to explore that and really depict Dennis, generously too, and give him his due. But it certainly is Abigail's story. and that element of wanting some freedom, wanting to break free of the constraints of the long marriage, but still really valuing it. And what a dilemma that is, right? So how do you manage that after all those years when you don't want to bust your family apart? And so she has to, that's part of what seeing her younger self triggers. It's like, oh yeah, she sees her younger self. She remembers a very passionate relationship, kind of comes back to her. She hasn't thought much about it. She realizes she doesn't remember everything about it. But I think it sort of activates something in her present day life that has to be dealt with.
Maybe in the form of a handsome detective. I have not finished yet because I have been taking copious notes and devouring it one delicious bite at a time. But I think one thing that I'm fascinated with is how many tension points you have and how you're able to make something as mundane as folding laundry. So I was sweating. Like I actually started sweating when they're folding the laundry and he's stacking it his artistic way and she's stacking it her artistic way because that's the only artistic outlet that they have. And then the kid's hungry and they want pizza and he has to find stale cookies and it was stressful. So how were you able to make something so mundane so tense?
Well, I guess partly that comes down to really observing the tensions in a family household and certainly folding laundry. I mean, how many hours when you have, a few people in the house, how many hours you spend folding those t-shirts. It's just something that has stuck with me and the many hours of like just taking care of business and how, and so I that needs to be written about too. And especially, and this is sort of a domestic thriller in some ways. So, it was fun to delve into that and to see where I could find interest and tension and let the reader sort of draw the lines between Abigail and Dennis's life and their own and where it wildly departs from their own. Like, you're not seeing yourself, your younger self everywhere. You may not be having, a thing with a handsome detective. So I love to ground this story in realism and then let it sort of push the extremes. I like to say like, that's what's really fun about and essential about art is we get to risk and test boundaries and really push beyond our comfort zone in a completely safe way. I think that's really important. So it's one of the things that I really set out to do in my novels.
Well, you did. I just want to, I was so struck by that too, but I think it's a really also this other craft issue that I think Sara brought up because it feels tense because of the work you've done to have us be in Abigail's experience. We are so with her. And so we start to see everything through her eyes. And that's sort of the work of building her. And I think it's so successful. Those details are like tossed off, we could read them in another book and it would be meaningless but here it feels charged with meaning because you brought us into her experience and everything feels very big to her when she's having this crisis.
That's a good point. Thank you, Megan.
It's really so lovely to hear you say that, Megan. I'm very honored. And yeah, it's like your character, it's this sort of strange possession, when you're writing, and you become possessed by these people. So, it will, when it's really working and you're feeling it, that's an amazing thing. So and then you hope that the reader might get in there too. So
yes,
it's good to hear that.
Absolutely. It's completely consumed. And weirdly, it felt also timely, pandemic timely, but just because we're all, I think, thinking about the nature of time really differently too, and memory. And I think there's a lot of self-reflection going on and reckonings. So I just want to everyone watching that, like how affecting it is. It works utterly as a page turner, but it's a real emotional ride too.
Well said. That's so true. And I see Laura Zigman, New York Times bestselling author Laura Zigman just joined us. Welcome. Her beautiful book, Separation Anxiety, came out just as the pandemic was descending. She was on as well. Laura, welcome.
I love that book. I'm putting a big plug for it right here. It's also incredibly relevant,
Yes.
and about reassessing after, and sort of the struggle to be married, to stay married, to be in a family, to be fulfilled, all of those things. So that is another fantastic read that's sort of touching and going a bit on parallel lines. I think it's really, one of my favorite things is when you see novels coming out and they somehow magically seem to attach to what's happening in the world. And I don't know how that happens, but I'm really into like sort of the muse, and I think of my work as co-creations with something that I don't understand, and some of it is subconscious and some of it is magic. And so I don't know, I think to me it's all part of that, but I don't know if you guys, I really enjoy seeing that and observing it.
Laura Zigman says she loves your book, Debra, and thank you so much for the shout out. Yay. Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is that it's timely, right? And some of it, and also that this is timeless. It's timeless that women are reckoning with what they're making of their life and what they're building of their life and honoring their gifts, and also, deciding whether they want to create a family, whether they want to stay in a marriage, whether they want to enter a marriage, all of these things. So it's both timely, I think, and timeless.
But too, as Deborah, you were saying, for me, it is that way too, in terms of the headspace that you need to get into. And it's like, I always sort of feel like I'm sounding woo-woo about it, but it is a kind of conjuring in, you were talking about how visual artists often work in a studio with music, and there's a lot of sort of chaos, and but they can center themselves somehow. But I think it is a little trickier for writers. It's, do you have any tricks you do to push yourself into that state?
Yeah, I write in the morning when I am clearest of mind, and this year I've been meditating, which has helped, not a whole lot, but briefly, and I think that's been a really interesting experience. But I guess, it's nothing that original, but I think it's taken me a long years to get to the point where I really do understand, if you sit your butt down every day and you just sort of force yourself to focus and be open to whatever comes, a lot of bad stuff is going to come, and you just have to take that in stride and keep going and keep sitting down again. And then eventually the good stuff comes. And that's why I sort of think of it as a co-creation. And also that's just such a relief, because it takes the responsibility. I'm not the only one carrying this. So I just feel like do my part, sit down, try my best, and my co-creator comes, whatever that force is, whether it's within me, whether it's from outside, and helps me along. And part of it, I think, is all those books I've read all my life, all those writers, I see them like, I have a picture of Toni Morrison as a screensaver. It's like my little icon, there's just certain, I feel they're up there somehow. And, I know, talk about sounding woo-woo. It really does sound woo-woo, but
I'm a yoga teacher. It doesn't sound woo-woo to me. I'm here for it.
It's just a relief to not think I'm all alone.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I think it's there's part of it that's discipline, as you say, getting there in the chair, and there's part of this is not judging yourself, so that those things that are in your head can come forward, that are in your unconscious can spill forward. And like for me, it's it's written a lot of books now, and it's not even the same across books. So it's not, and you have to sort of listen to your changing rhythms of writing. And sometimes you can go 40 pages and you realize, no, this should have been first person, and like there's all kinds of mistakes. So as you say, you have to forgive yourself. First of all, a very bad first draft, and maybe a second draft, maybe a third, but also to just take chances and not. I've never been one to believe that there was a formula or to any of this. That it's very personal and it can change.
Actually, there's a question that I would love to ask you, Megan, and that's the perfect segue to it. It's about genre, and I know that you are revered as a thriller crime writer. but also it seemed to me to really push the boundaries of the form. And it's something I'm really interested in as well. So I would love to just hear you talk about how you see yourself. Do you think about your genre labeling? Do you just write the story that you want to write, or what's your thinking on that?
Yeah, it's funny. When I wrote my first book, I wasn't, that definitely has a big crime in it, several crimes. I did not consider it I don't even know if I made those distinctions. It was a novel, and it was only when, I mean, this is a difference, right, between writing and publishing, but when you are published, you have to, like, what shelf does this go on in the bookstore? What list does this go on? And as someone who read a lot of crime fiction loves it, I was excited that I had been sort of placed there. But also, I've never. There's a lot of sort of common crime novel thing. I've never written a series. Don't write about cops or detectives or journalists. I write about criminals mostly. So. Or people like, that sort of fall into a situation is my favorite, fall into a pressure cooker and then you just keep, So I don't really think about it that much. That said, I can't imagine writing a book without a crime in it because it has become the way I think of story. And I kind of love the spectacle it offers, and I guess people at their extremes that is inevitably going to happen. And it solved all the problems I used to have, like how to build a story, how to make a plot, because it gives you your whole plot, like it's the whole thing. So there's part of it that's that. But it is interesting how often it comes up, because I actually think a lot of writers are in this in-between space, and that the genre in some ways, a lot of domestic thrillers might have more in common with Joyce Carol Oates, say, than they would with a cozy mystery writer or Agatha Christie. So it's just boxes, right? We all have to put things in boxes. Did you feel any set, like, what's your feelings about it? Do you feel like you're ever miscategorized or too narrowly categorized?
I would say I was like, for example, I got that Edgar nomination. That's a nod from, in case anyone doesn't know what that is, it's like the Mystery Writers of America's awards. It's wonderful. And
you're getting a lot of thumbs ups on this.
And that's first, which as someone who was nominated for that and lost, but also someone who was a judge on that, that's really something, because there's a lot of first crime novels. So yes.
Well, thank you. I mean, that was a huge thrill. And so I really am, I embrace that side of it, and I embrace plot, and I love plot. And like you, I love crimes. Even my short stories, which were pretty literary, they're always kind of dark. And I want action in my book. So all of those things I feel very much in the stream of this thriller mystery world. I think the one point where I question a little bit the effect is that sometimes I feel badly that I think some readers bring a certain set of expectations to the books that they want to see satisfied, and they might not be satisfied by that if they're expecting. It's sort of what you were saying, there's so many different kinds of books in this category.
This is why you never go on Goodreads.
Yeah. This is why it's just that I don't read my reviews, and I don't go on Goodreads, and I don't go on Amazon, but I am aware, and I am always sad that sometimes people feel, hey, there's too many flashbacks in this book, or it's too much in the characters, or it's too quiet. And those are all valid, but I do kind of feel like, but you're looking for a certain kind of thriller, and this is another kind of book, so that's okay. But take and have your anyway, take issue with anything. It's obvious no one's writing a perfect book around here, but that's the only part of it. It's like, I feel I don't want to let people down who are expecting something super specific.
Right. Yes.
That's
Yes.
the other part of it.
But I think there's probably far more people in that case that read it and are won over that they don't that they like these books too, where it's not as clean, tidily wrapped up. And because I like both kinds of books, I like this sort of shaggy ending, but there's also something so nice about things sort of locking into place. And hopefully there's room enough for all of us.
I think there is. And I'm like, look, I'm so thrilled to have it out there. So that's the first thing to say and the last thing to say. It's great.
And you started a new book, right? So you're already, you're in it, you're ready to go again.
Yes, I'm about 50 pages into novel 3. As I said, we were chatting a little bit beforehand, I'm in the really fun phase where it's pure invention. I don't have to solve any problems yet. I only have to create them. That's wonderful. It is, I mentioned that I lived in Berlin in the 90s, so it's somewhat inspired by my time there, which was a super exciting time right after the wall came down, and it was a wild, wild city. And again, has to do with present and past. I think that's really my central obsession that I'm starting to realize I'm not getting away from, which is looking back over fairly long chunks of time. So, my first novel, The Captives, is about sort of high school classmates who meet in their 30s in a very extreme setting, which is prison. And so it's all about sort of looking back at their teen years and this very pressure cooker situation that they find themselves in now. And then, You Again obviously has this younger self, older self theme. And my next one, it's shaping up to have some similar stuff too.
Know that I forget what great writer said, but we're all writing just one book over and over again. I have a quote over my desk that we're all just trying to solve one case, and I think that whatever we do, that's it. And you can try to run away from it, but it will find you. There's something kind of. That's why we return to an author. I think it's not to see necessarily the wild thing that comes with next, but that their interests are your interests, and that you're going to see an evolution, but it's still the core there is going to stay the same.
Definitely.
We have a comment from the audience. Kate says, I hope there is a scene in Prague and perhaps something about bank accounts in East Berlin. Ooh. Okay. We'll have to see.
There might be. Thank you for the ideas.
No pressure. No pressure.
She gets her little notebook out. Well, thank you, ladies, so much. This has been such an incredible honor having you, Megan Abbott and Debra Jo Immergut, here in conversation with us on our Mighty Mystery Celebrity Edition. I want to thank you for coming on and spending time with us and our audience, and all of your wonderful questions and thoughtful interview, Megan, and your openness and authenticity and presence, Debra. I'd love to share just a few of your reviews as we wrap up. The New York Times book review called You Again stunning. Feeling eerily relevant, perfect for this time of deep uncertainty and rapidly shifting news. It is dreamlike and immersive, like falling into someone else's alternative reality. I think that is a dream review from the New York Times book review. Congratulations. Kirkus gave it a starred review and said it is at once a mind-bending puzzle and a profound meditation on love, fate, ambition, and regret. Oh my gosh, this is amazing. Booklist says that you deliver a furious page turner. I could go on and on. Laura Zigman says, congratulations on today's amazing Washington Post review, and getting lots of thumbs up on that. And she said she's enjoying the conversation as well. Laura, thank you for joining us. And thank you to everyone in the audience who has joined us. We're getting lots of thanks from everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Debra. Thank you, Megan. Is there any parting thoughts that either of you would like to share as we wrap up here?
I'm just so grateful. Megan, good luck with your next work. And everyone, please read all of Megan's books and also watch her amazing television show, Dare. Yay. And yeah, I'm just super, super honored to be here. It's been so fun.
Great. Well, it was such a pleasure, and thank you, Sarah, for being at the control board. It does feel like NASA with you.
Well, I have loved hosting you. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we will see you next time on a Mighty Mystery Series. Have a great day, everyone.